Okay, I guess we will get started. Again, good morning, everyone. It's been some time since we've had a chance to have a data officer training, so I want to welcome all of you this morning. Today, we're going to have Lucelle and Caroline, who are going to be reviewing the Performance Measures Progress Report. The links for this document went out on Monday, I believe, and so it'll be time to start gathering that information. And we thought it would be a good idea, since this is one of the more challenging data reporting documents that we to have a refresher course. So all of the information, as you know, is on the website, and we will also be posting this video of this training and the other trainings that are on the website. We'll be posting this as soon as we get it available, hopefully by Monday. And then, of course, we're always available to answer questions. So without further ado, I will turn it over to who's going first?
Caroline.
Caroline.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa, for the welcome. And thank you all for attending this data officer training. It's actually been a while for me personally since I've given a data officer training, so I'm happy to get back into it again. As Melissa said, this is really just meant as a refresher training. We know that sometimes there's some turnover with data officers, and there's other people that start filling out these reports and haven't done that before. And so therefore we thought it was appropriate to present you with this refresher training. You will recognize though that, some of the slides you may have seen before, because we will go over similar topics as we have done in the past. So before we dive into all of this, I would like to start with a little quiz. And the correct answers to these first couple of quiz questions will be given to you at the end of the presentation on the last slide. However, if you listen closely, you will find out the answers during our presentation if we do our job right. So here we go. Question 1. The expenditures asked for in the performance measures refer to the spending of the statewide expansion of Pearl Herring contract, the statewide contract funds, and nothing else. Now you can write down the answer just for yourself to check your knowledge. Is that true or is that false? Question number 2. Each provider should submit a separate performance measures progress report to ILS. Again, just write down for yourself whether you think that's true or false, and we'll get to that during our presentation as well. All right, and then the last question, where can county budget items approved in the 5-year statewide contract be found? Is that A, on the ILS website, B, attachment B1 of the statewide contract, or C, attachment C of the statewide contract? All right. So let's move on to an introductory slide that we figured would be helpful. You guys all have been involved with, the performance measures progress report, but as you know, ILS has multiple reporting requirements. One of the reporting requirements that we will not talk extensively about today is the ILS 195. I mention it here because many of you probably have just finished completing the ILS 195 and have submitted it to ILS. Just so everybody knows, the individual links for the ILS 195 were sent out via email on March 1st, and the ILS 195 was due on April 1st. For the ILS 195, we ask providers to submit one report per provider. So if a county has multiple public defense providers, let's say a public defender and an ACP, we expect to receive one ILS 195 report from the public defender's office and one report from the ACP. The ILS 195 asks providers to report data over the last calendar year. So this last round, you had to report data that referred to January 1st, 2022 up until December 31st, 2022. Then what we're going to be talking about today, let's see, the Performance Measures Progress Report. In many ways, it's similar to the ILS 195, but obviously, you know, those are two different reports. And I wanted just to contrast the two in one slide so that we're not getting confused. Because for the Performance Measures Progress Report, we operate kind of in the same way. We also send out these individual links with a unique link that will take you then to the Performance Measures Report. So the links that were sent out for the Performance Measures Progress Report were sent out last Monday, April 3, and the Performance Measures Progress Report is due on April 28th. Technically, it's due on April 30th because that is on a Sunday, we set April 28th as the due date. These individual links will take you to the online survey. When you click on it, you go to the online survey, and both the ILS 195 as well as the Performance Measures Progress Report are in a survey program called Question Pro. So it might look similar, but please be aware of the fact that the ILS 195 and the Performance Measures Progress Report are two different reporting requirements and two different reports that both will need to be completed and submitted to ILS. Also, for the Performance Measures Progress Report, we ask one submission per provider. And to make things easy, the Performance Measures Progress Report asks providers to report data over the prior state fiscal year, which is different from the reporting period of the ILS 195. So the Performance Measures Progress Report, this round, for which you just received the emails and the links, we ask people to report data from April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023 for most of the questions on the Performance Measures Progress Report. There are two questions that are an exception to this, and Lucelle will tell you all about these questions moving forward. So Lucelle, I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to dive right in. So for those of you who have been in one of our trainings before, this next slide is going to be very familiar to you. I think you might as well make it part of ILS's mission statement at this point. We need accurate data. When you are completing the Performance Measures Progress Report, reporting accurate data is required under the terms of the statewide contract. And when you send us your progress report, we don't just file it away and never look at it again. We look at every single progress report that you send in. We analyze the data, and then ILS puts all of that information together into an annual report. And we send that report to the Division of Budget on June 1st every single year. And that report is basically a status report of how implementation of statewide reforms is going. And so it's really essential that you are completing the report with as accurate data as possible, because that equals continued funding for all of you. And it really does come back around, because continued funding, we hope helps to assist you as you're working towards providing better representation overall. So when you're completing these reports, complete it, check your work, and then send it to us, because we don't just file this information away. We do actually take a look at it, analyze it, and use it and send it off to the Division of Budget. Next slide, please. So if you're asking yourself, well, how can I know that I'm sending accurate data to ILS? You can find a budget in attachment B1 of the statewide contract. And what you're seeing on your screen right now is a sample of attachment B1. And this sample is just something that ILS created for training purposes, but we did it because we wanted you, if you haven't before, to see what attachment B1, the budget, looks like. And all budgets have the same format. So regardless of your provider or your county, they're all going to look like the sample that you see on your screen right now. They all start off with the provider office. So as you can see outlined in red on this sample, it starts off with the public defender's office. If you have an assigned counsel program, after all of the public defender information, the assigned program's budget will either start at the bottom of that page or on the next page. If you have a conflict defender, then their information will go after that. But they all are contained in attachment B1. And each provider office is split up into 3 categories: caseload relief, which you see outlined in blue, quality improvement, and counsel at first appearance. And then within each of those categories, just to keep it interesting, it's split up into different parts. So under caseload relief, you can see that in green, it starts off with personnel. Under quality improvement, there's contract/consultants. And then under counsel at first appearance, you can see the personnel part appears again. Now, why is this important? The budget will help you to determine which positions to report on your progress report and how to categorize them. Next slide, please. In your statewide contract, there is also an attachment C, and that is the work plan. And similarly to the budget, all work plans have the same format. And so work plans are split up by budget year. So you can see outlined in red, this sample is for a year 3 budget. You see the provider office, the sample is of the public defender. And then again, you'll see that it has the personnel part in this sample, but when you're looking at the full work plan, it would provide you with the different parts such as contract consultant and OTPS parts. And the work plan, just like the budget, will help you categorize reported positions when you're filling out the performance measures progress report. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does that actually look like in practice? I'm going to take you through how to read the budget for question number 1. And for question number 1, it's asking you to please report the number of attorney positions. And when we say attorney positions, we mean filled attorney positions. So sometimes on your budget, you'll see that there's an attorney position that is listed on a line, but you might know from working in the office that that position hasn't been filled. You wouldn't report a position for someone who doesn't work there. So we're looking for filled attorney positions that are funded as of March 31st, 2023 by budget expenditure items listed in the 3 categories I mentioned previously: caseload relief, quality improvement, and counsel at first appearance of the statewide contract. And you'll see on that progress report that in parentheses, it says, see attachment B1. Now, if you don't have access to attachment B1, you can ask your chief defender or the assigned counsel administrator, or if you have difficulty or if they have difficulty accessing the statewide contract to provide you with attachment B1 or attachment C, you can also contact us here at ILS and we'll be able to provide you with that information so that you can complete your progress report. One other thing to note is that the look back period, as Caroline mentioned, is for the fiscal year. For this April report is for the fiscal year. So last fiscal year, April 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2023. For question number 1, which is asking you to report on attorney positions, and question number 3, which is asking you to report on non-attorney positions, that reference period is different. For question number 1 and question number 3, we are asking you to report on attorney and non-attorney positions filled attorney and non-attorney positions from April 1st, 2018, that's when the statewide contracts began, through March 31st, 2023. And that reference period is only for questions 1 and questions 3. I know it gets a little bit confusing, but if you look through the instructions and definitions, this note that I added will be there as well. And of course, if you have additional questions, you can contact us at our performance measures inbox. So when you're looking at the budget, how do you actually report on a position? So the first thing to do after you read the question and you know that you're looking back from April 1st, 2018, is to identify all of the categories in your contract. So here you can see there's caseload relief, quality improvement, and counsel at first appearance. And make sure that you're looking at each section carefully because there are going to be attorney positions possibly listed in each section. So if you look under caseload relief, under personnel, there are 3 attorney positions that are on the 2 lines. So the first line is an attorney supervisor. So that's 1 position. And then the second line, it says assistant public defenders. But if you notice, there's the number 2 in parentheses before that position. So that tells you that those are 2 positions that you would have to report. So under caseload relief, right there, that's 3 positions. If you go down and you look under quality improvement, under contracted consultant, it says expert services, investigator, computer equipment. There are no attorney positions that are listed on those lines. And so you would skip down to the next section, counsel at first appearance. And in this section, under personnel, you can see that there's actually 1 attorney position, assistant public defender, because it's the salary, and you wouldn't count the second line, assistant public defender, because that's just the fringe. So for question number 1, if we're using this sample budget, you would report 4 attorney positions, the attorney supervisor, the 2 assistant public defenders, and the assistant public defender that's listed under counsel at first appearance. So the second part of question number 1 is, how do you categorize these positions? And there are 3 categories that the positions could fall into. The first is the position could be a new hire. The second is the position could be an upgrade of an existing hire. And the third category is the position could be listed as on contract. So if the position falls under caseload relief personnel or counsel at first appearance personnel, those positions will be categorized as either a new hire or an upgrade of an existing hire. If there were attorney positions that were on the lines under contract consultant, that attorney position would be categorized as on contract. So because there is no attorney position listed under contract consultant in this example, none of the attorney positions would be categorized as on contract. And so what's the difference between a new hire and an upgrade of an existing hire? Next slide, please. So a new hire is essentially someone that was brought in under the statewide contract. Their salary is paid by the statewide contract. And since they have been working for your provider office, there's been no change in their salary. There's been no change in their number of hours worked. Regardless of how long they've worked for the provider office, if they were hired in 2018 and they're still there right now, they would still be counted as a new hire. An upgrade of an existing hire is a position that was paid for, that's being paid for by the statewide contract, and they have to fit into essentially 2 categories. An upgrade of an existing hire would be categorized if a position went from part-time to full-time, so the number of hours worked increases, and then you would also have to check if their salary increased. So you would look and be able to find that in the work plan. So in this first top example that you're looking at, it says upgrade to assistant public defender positions from part-time to full-time. And then if you look down, it says the original salary was 97,000, and it's an increase of 31,000. So those two assistant public defender positions would be categorized as upgrade of existing hires. Now, it's important when you are going over this information, when you're looking at the work plan and the budget, that you're looking starting at year one, looking at all of the years in the attachments, and also looking at all of the amendments, because you can have a attorney who was hired in 2018 or 2019, and they were a new hire. And then in 2020, they went from being part-time to full-time and they got a raise. So that may be in year 3 or year 4 of the budget and the work plan. And you would want to make sure that you're looking at all of the different years so that you can account for any changes that might have happened with the position. Next slide, please. So question number 3 is pretty much identical to question number 1. You're going to go through the same process. The only difference is this time you are looking for non-attorney positions. And once again, it's that same look back period. We're going back to April 1st, 2018. So any non-attorney positions that are filled from April 1st, 2018 through March 31st, 2023. So in this sample budget, if you look under caseload relief personnel, outlined in red, you can see that there are 2 non-attorney positions. There's a paralegal and a secretary. And then if you go down to the next category, quality improvement, under contracted consultant, it says expert services and investigator. So that is 1 non-attorney position. And then if you go down to counsel at first appearance, there are no non-attorney positions. There's just the attorney positions. So there would be nothing to report from that section. So for the purposes of this question, if you were filling out question number 3, you would report 3 non-attorney positions: the paralegal, the secretary, and the investigator. Now, how do you kind of categorize each of these into the new hire, the upgrade of the existing hire, and on contract? Just like with question number 1, because the paralegal and the secretary are appearing under personnel, you would either categorize them as a new hire or an upgrade of an existing hire. If you're looking at the investigator position, because it's listed under contract consultant, they would be categorized as on contract on your performance measures progress report. Now, in the performance measures progress report, there is another question, question number 5, that asks you to report on investigators. And this is a place where I think that's tripped up a lot of people, not specific to any provider or county, kind of across the board. So next slide, please. So what's the difference? So question number 3, as we just went over, asks you to report the total number of filled non-attorney positions, including investigators. And another way to think of it is question number 3 is asking for in-house positions. So that may be an investigator that comes into your provider office, they have a caseload, and they regularly, work on cases at your office. Question number 5 asks you to report on experts and investigators, and we're asking you to report the dollar amount of retained investigative services actually spent from statewide contract funding. And the difference is you may have an investigator who's coming into your office on a case-by-case basis. They are most likely receiving an hourly rate as opposed to a salary. And you may have them come in and you may have multiple investigators come in. And so that person would most likely be someone who would be reported under question number 5. If you're looking for the difference on the budget, as you saw in our example, the investigator was listed under contract consultant, but sometimes on the budget, there's also an NAPS line, non-attorney professional services line, and that sometimes will include the investigator, and you can tell that will tell you if they're being paid by an hourly rate or a salary, and you'll know the difference if you're looking at that. But yes, salaried investigator, question number 3, hourly rate, question number 5. Next slide, please. So if you're asking yourself, wow, that was a lot of information and that wasn't even the whole report, this is a lot to remember. We have created additional materials for you to help you as you're filling out this report, because we do know that it is a lot to remember and it can feel a bit overwhelming at times. We have all of these supplemental materials on our website, and we also have, as Melissa and Caroline mentioned, all of our previous data officer trainings on our website as well. And are you able to go to the website, Caroline?
Yes, I will stop sharing this screen and instead we'll go to the website real quick. So bear with me. Let me see to share. I believe you guys see the homepage now of the ILS website.
So this is the homepage. We have a specific section for research and data analysis. And there are 2 sections that you can look at. The first is the annual data reporting section. When you go to that web page, that gives you an overview of all of the reports that you have to submit to ILS. So it goes over the ILS 195, which also has materials for you, how the ILS 195 was developed. It also tells you about caseload standards implementation, the annual financial report, which is another report that you submit to ILS. And then at the bottom is the information on the performance measures progress report. And there you can find a PDF of the current report for April 2023. You can find frequently asked questions. You can find our original instructional video that we created a few years ago. There's a quick check sheet to go through to make sure that you've answered all the questions, a step-by-step guide that will take you through every question, and a checklist that you can fill out when you're done to make sure that you have followed all of the steps and completed the report as well as you can before submitting it to us. There's also a case management system comparison chart there. If you go back up and go back to research and data analysis, we have a special tab just for all of you. It's a data officers tab. And this is where you can find all of our previous trainings. And the most recent ones are all the way at the bottom, just to make it fun for you. But I think that the February 17th, 2022 training from last year and the April 7th, 2022 training from last year, if you want to go a little bit more in depth on how to complete the performance measures progress report, you can find all of that information here. You can also find the data officer newsletters that Riley Weinstein has created for all of you to stay abreast of new developments that are happening. And this is also where we're going to post the data officer training that you're watching right now. So there's a lot of information, useful information for all of you under the data officer tab and under the annual data reporting tab. And then, of course, if you go through all of that and you still have questions, we are here to answer them. You can call us, you can email us, you can email the performance measures inbox, which I'll put in the chat box, and get started with all of your questions. The last thing that I'll remind you about is that the April 28th deadline is a firm deadline. As I said at the beginning, we have a report that's due to the Division of Budget on June 1st. So we need all of your data because we want to be able to say that all of you are in compliance and that you completed the report on time and sent it to us. And so if you can stick to that April 28th deadline and send us that information so we can analyze the data and complete our report, that would be great. If you have any issues or questions with being able to complete the report on time, try to get that information to us as soon as possible. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Caroline.
All right. Well, thank you, Lucelle. I'm going to pull back up our PowerPoint. Go. Can you all see the PowerPoint? All right. So the section that I am going to dive into now is how we actually use the information. Lucelle has told you about how to report the information to ILS, but once it comes in at ILS, what do we do with the information and what does it look like? As you know, we're submitting an annual performance measures report to the Division of Budget each year on June 1st. But what does that look like? Now, for those of you, some of you might know that, you can also find the complete PDFs of these reports on our website. But I will kind of like walk you through a report and highlight some of the findings so you get an idea on how we use the information that you submit to us. So the annual performance measures report includes the 52 upstate counties and New York City. And in total, that comes down to 126 providers of mandated criminal defense representation. Providers engaging solely in family court representation and the providers from the so-called Hurl Herring counties are not included in the report that I am going to show you. So it's only the statewide counties, as we call them. The numbers in the report refer to the period of April 1st, 2018 till March 31st, 2022. What I'm doing is I'm going to present to you some data from the report that we submitted last year to DOB. And so it refers to that period. As you know, some of the data points refer all the way back to the start of the statewide implementation, being the attorney and non-attorney positions. The remaining data points that will become clear when I present them as well will refer to the fiscal year, which for this report is April 1, 2021 till March 31st, 2022. The report is categorized in these three categories that you also see in the budget. We have a section on counsel at arraignment, a section on caseload relief, and a section on overall quality improvement. These sections each include both numbers, aggregate numbers reported by you, as well as qualitative info. As you know, or as you may know, the second part of the performance measures progress report includes some open-ended questions where we ask you to describe how you've used the statewide funds towards counsel at arraignment, caseload relief, and overall quality improvement, and also if there were any challenges to describe those. We actually, Lucelle and I, read and read over again all of the text you submit because actually that gives us a lot of information. We read through this information, and what we do, we use that information to then compile a summary that we put in the report for the Division of Budget. And the nice thing about this qualitative info is that it really provides the background and the context for the numbers that we report in the annual report. The numbers that we present are in the aggregate and also per county. So in the main body of the report, you will see aggregate numbers only. And what does that mean? Well, we speak about all of the 52 statewide counties and New York City together. When you take all of that together, how many new attorneys were hired, for instance. However, when you go to the appendix, we also present you with the data points per county. So you can then look up any given county and see, for instance, how many attorney positions were hired in this specific county by using the statewide funds since the start of statewide implementation. I will show you first some aggregate numbers in the next couple of slides, and then I will also present to you the appendix so that you have an idea of what it looks like per county. So let's start with the counsel at arraignment section. The numbers that we report in that section are the following, and again, this refers to last year's report that was submitted on June 1st, 2022 to DOB. So what that report demonstrated is that between April 1st, 2018, since the start of statewide implementation, up to March 31st, 2022, 425 new attorneys who provide counsel at arraignment were hired. When you look at the type of positions, 270 of these were new hires, 36 were upgrades of existing positions, and 117 were contract positions. In addition, for an estimated 101,067 cases, representation at arraignment was provided as a result of the statewide contract funding over the last year. And this was actually an increase of more than 3,600 cases over last year's reported cases. So this means that with the use of statewide contract funding, there were over 100,000 cases that representation at arraignment was provided. Now these cases include the cases that are represented by hired attorneys, but they also include cases that are represented by attorneys who receive, for instance, a CAFA stipend. Then the caseload relief section. Between April 1st, 2018 and March 31st, 2022, 565 new attorneys were hired with the funding provided by the statewide expansion of the Hurl Herring settlement. So this is slightly more, about 100 more than the number of attorneys in the last slide. And the difference here is that we include all of the new attorneys that were hired, regardless of whether they do or don't provide counsel at arraignment. Of these 565 new attorney hires, 340 were new hires, 46 were upgrades of existing positions, and 178 were placed on contract. In addition, in total, an estimated almost 80,000 cases were represented by attorneys who were hired with the statewide contract funding during the period of April 1, 2021 till March 31st, 2022. A little more information on caseload relief includes the non-attorney hires. When you look back all the way to the start of the statewide implementation up until March 31st, 2022, 341 non-attorneys were hired with the statewide contract funding throughout the 52 counties in New York City. And of these, 259 were new hires, 18 were upgrades, and 64 were placed on contract. More interestingly, we have a pie chart here that shows you what type of non-attorneys those 341 were. And as you can see, about 55% of these non-attorney hires were administrative support staff. About 18% were social workers, about 13% were investigators, and about 13.5% were any other non-attorney positions. Then we have a section on overall quality improvement. One of the things that we report there is supervising attorneys, because supervising attorneys or attorneys who provide training or mentoring are a mechanism to improve the overall quality of representation. And so of the 565 attorney hires statewide since April 1, 2018, 73 are attorneys who supervise the work of others or provide training or mentoring. Another aspect of quality improvement is training your attorneys to keep them up to date about what's going on. And we ask about that in the performance measures progress report as well. And what we see from last year's report is that 304 training events were hosted, sponsored, or co-sponsored by the statewide contract funding between April 1, 2021 and March 31st, 2022. In addition, for a total of 1,146 attorneys, their attendance at training events, such as registration fees, travel reimbursements, and accommodations, was supported by the statewide contract funding. Another aspect of quality improvement is the increased use of non-attorney professional services, such as contracted expert services and contracted investigative services. So we have some numbers on that too. Statewide, a total of about $830,000 were spent on contracted expert services, and a total of about $367,000 was spent on contracted investigative services in the past year, referring to that period of April 1st, 2021 till March 31st, 2022. Expert services were provided as a result of that were provided as a result of statewide contract funding were used in a total of 4,011 cases. And this 4,011 cases, that number includes expert services provided by both salaried as well as contracted experts. And then investigative services provided as a result of the statewide contract funding were used in a total of 8,936 cases. Again, this includes both salaried as well as contracted investigators. So these were a couple of the aggregate numbers that we present in the report. It's not all of them, because I picked, or I highlighted I think the most relevant ones here. But if you want to see the complete report, you can go to our website and you can find the complete report. It's publicly available. The appendix, like I said, then includes also numbers, but then the numbers are presented per county. So what does that look like? Let me show you that. This is what the appendix looked like, and I only took an excerpt from the appendix. Obviously, we have a row for each of the counties. I just selected 3 of them. And here you can see, categorized in order of the performance measures progress report questions, the key data points that we have per county. So for instance, Albany County shows up here as the first county. You can see that all of the public defense, mandated public defense providers, mandated criminal defense providers in Albany County reported a total of 23 attorneys that were funded by the statewide contract funding. And of those 23, 20 attorneys provided counsel at first appearance. And the total number of cases that were represented by funded attorneys was about 3,991. Now, and then you see the other information for the other questions reported as well. So at the county level, you can see how much money was spent, in how many cases expert services or investigative services were used. and also, you know, the number of training events that were funded or attended, and the number of attorney and non-attorney positions. Lastly, what I wanted to draw your attention to is that this appendix, all the way at the bottom, has a total row in which we add up all of these numbers for all of the counties together. And that's where we get the aggregate numbers that you saw me present in the previous slides. So that's how we get to the 565 new attorney hires that were done since the start of statewide implementation in the statewide counties in New York City. All right, so as Lucelle already indicated, we presented you with a lot of information. I can imagine that there's some questions that you have. So if you want to, you can ask us your questions now, or you can email us at performance@ils.ny.gov, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So I'm going to open it up right now and see if there's any questions.
No questions at all? We even have our special guest with us, Claire Zartarian, who is here to answer questions about budgets that we know we can't handle here in the research unit. Don't be shy. There we go. Caroline, can you see the question?
I'm opening the chat right now.
Okay.
So I am looking here. From Catherine, if a position was filled and is now vacant, do I still list it? Lucelle, this refers to your part, and this is a question, it's a good question, so perhaps you can talk a little bit about that.
So if you have a position that was filled and then was vacant, and then you've hired someone else, then you would report that position. If you have a position that was filled and is now vacant, you wouldn't report that position, but there is a catch-all question at the end of the performance measures progress report. I believe it's question number 11. Yes, where you can say, you know, question number 1, in the budget, it's listed that we had an assistant public defender, the position was filled and is now vacant. Because when we review the report, we'll look to question number 11 to see if there was any additional information you weren't able to report in the previous questions. So you can kind of report that, you'll still report it to us, but it won't be counted in question number 1.
All right. I hope that answers the question. I see that there is another question in the chat from Mary Jo Snyder. She sent an email this morning, and here's a question she had. So let me read the question to everyone. Our office utilizes the PDCMS database. When running a report for new case assignments per attorney during the April 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2023 timeframe, it lists case numbers for both overall total cases as well as misdemeanor equivalent. Please advise which case number to include in our report when listing our attorneys and their total number of cases assigned. One example states the overall total cases are 141. However, the misdemeanor equivalent cases for the same attorney are 307. So the answer to this question is that in the performance measures progress report, we would like you to report the 141. So the overall total cases, and just count each case as one. The misdemeanor equivalent cases applies a weight to different case categories, and that is what ILS does for purposes of the caseload report, which is a different report that we submit to DOB later in the year. So for performance measures progress report purposes, please just report the overall total cases, 141, and just count each case as being one. Don't apply any weights. It's a good question, though. Thank you for asking. And then here, another question we received from Brenda Jean Giacchino. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Are data officers assigned per county or per provider? Dutchess has an assigned counsel program, and the Public Defender's Office is a data officer designated for each. I think I'm going to turn this question over to Melissa, our research director.
Sure, yes, I unmuted myself. So Brenda, thank you for the question. So as originally conceived, the data officers were going to be assigned for the county. So for each county who was receiving, and New York City, who received funding through the statewide expansion, ILS put in each of their contracts, I believe, each of their, contracts that they're in their budgets, that there would be one data officer paid with that funding per county. What we know and what we have come to realize is that if that data officer is situated or seated physically within the public defender office, then there are confidentiality issues that arise when that data officer attempts to work with the assigned counsel or any other provider within the county. And so what we've seen is that there are some circumstances where, again, for confidentiality, one office is unwilling to share all of their information, understandably, with the data office when they're in another agency. And so what has happened informally, or sometimes more formally, is that in each provider office, the provider themselves are designating someone within their office as their quote unquote data officer. And that's why Lucelle and Riley, who's unable to join us today, have really struggled to determine who's the quote unquote official data officer or the ILS designated data officer. So what we've said is that if within the county, the data officer who's funded by ILS is in one provider office, but both provider offices are willing to work together to provide that data officer with aggregate data, just total numbers, as a way to help verify when they're working on their ILS 195 or their performance measures, we encourage that. But however, if there's a decision made within the county that they're not comfortable having a data officer in a public defender or legal aid office having any kind of access, even in the aggregate form, to the data from the other providers, then we understand that. And then we're in contact with, and we send links out to, and we invite all of the people that the provider offices tell us are their data officers. So I think, Brenda, we were emailing, I believe that Caroline was emailing, and we were discussing internally. The other specific question was, when you're filling out your forms, it says data officer to indicate who the data officer is. If you are the person who's completing the form and you're the person we should contact if we have a question about the form, include your information, whether or not you are the ILS designated data officer. So I hope that clears it up. And I know it's become complicated, more complicated than we had hoped. And moving forward, we're hoping to find ways to rectify that. Oh, good, Brenda. Okay, good. So I think there's one more, and this is about attorney positions and fewer hours, and that's out of my wheelhouse. So I'll turn it back over to Caroline and Lucelle.
All right, I'll read the question from Annetta Marinacchio. I'm not good at names, I'm sorry again. I have two attorneys that stayed with the office. They switched positions. Our public defender stepped down and now is the APD first. And now that person was appointed to public defender. How do I handle the person that took a step down? Less hours and less salary. I must say that that is a very good question, and I'm not sure if we ever had
I
this
don't know. So
situation before, right?
they only switched positions essentially. That's it.
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe Claire, you can provide more insight into this. Wouldn't we just, I think you would just continue to report the two positions the same way that you always have, because when you report the position, we don't have their name and title. We just have the title on the budget line of the position. And so if the public defender position is still filled, and it's filled, and the APD position is still filled, then I think that you would still just report them as you have been. Maybe. Claire, does
Right.
that sound about right?
Yeah, and if you like, I mean, I'm not sure what county you're referring to, but if you want to confirm that and, reach out, I'll put my email address in the chat box, and I can just pull up your budget and make sure that it's, being reported properly.
Yeah, she says she's from Wyoming County.
Wyoming County.
Okay.
Right. I tend to agree with what you're saying, Lucella. I guess my only question would be when saying less hours and less salary. Yeah, per position and not per person. Right. Unless the position itself went from full-time to part-time or less than part-time. But if the position themselves stayed while people changed place.
Right.
Right. Okay. Annetta said that makes sense. You are welcome. See, we did have questions. Anita, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
So are there any other questions? Oh, there we go. Oh my. Would you like to take this one, Caroline?
Yes, let me read the question. So another lengthy question from the email this morning, Mary Jo Snyder says, when including the dates of hire for both attorney and non-attorney staff members, do we include the date they were hired into a Hurl Herring position? For example, a non-attorney staff member who previously held the title of senior typist/data officer moved to a paralegal assistant position under the same Hurl Herring salary and fringe. She's still full-time, still in Hurl Herring salary and fringe. Is it correct in reporting that she is a new hire based on the position she is now in? I know it would not be an upgrade due to salary increase. I'm not sure what to report since she was already in a Hurl Herring position prior to the new position. When researching the ILS website, watching previous training videos, I want to say that this would be considered a new hire, as this paralegal assistant position was a vacant position. Is my thought on this correct? If so, I am unsure what date to use as starting date. I think this refers to kind of like in the same way to the previous question we talked about, and I think the way to go is to approach it per position and not per person. So if you would look at this from a position perspective, then yes, I agree. It's a new hire because there was a vacant position, and so it is a new hire. And the date to use as a starting date is the date that that person started in that new position. My colleagues here on the call, do you guys have anything to add or?
No, I think that makes sense to me.
Yes,
Right.
that makes sense.
And thank you so much for these questions, because I must say these are very good questions.
Yes.
And we also realize, how complicated this sometimes is, because frankly, I have to think about these things too while I'm trying to answer your question. And so I'm happy that these questions come up and that they come up in this forum so that everybody can, hear the questions and also hear the answers to the question, because usually you're not, the only one struggling with these types of things. So thank you again. Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So we like to keep ourselves on track. And so it is 12 noon right now. And so we're going to wrap it up for today. I just remind you again that a couple of reminders as we sign off. All of the materials that were presented are on the website, and Lucelli was able to show you where those will be. Lucelli and Caroline showed you that. We do have a firm deadline for receipt of these performance measures of April 28th because we do have such a tight turnaround window to get our report to the Division of Budget. And also just thank you. Thank you for your continued commitment to helping us gather this accurate data. Accurate data equals continued funding, and continued funding equals better quality representation. And so entering into this partnership with us to collect this data that we would not be able to collect all on our own, we greatly appreciate it. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of us, or you can send them to the performance inbox that's right there on your screen. So thank you so very much, and have a happy and healthy and safe holiday over this weekend. Take care, everybody. Bye.